The head of the EU delegation in Nigeria, Ambassador Arian. Now we go from Scotland independence to security matters. IS militants in Iraq have released a video showing a British man being held by them. The video does not feature a beheading, but it does show a third British man wearing orange clothing who says he's a prisoner, and he asked why he and others have been abandoned by the US and UK governments. In the video, the hostage says other European governments have negotiated for the release of their hostages, but says the US and UK have done things differently. The hostage also says this is the first of several of what he calls programs in which he will explain the philosophy of IS. From comments on the tape, it's clear it was made this year, but not precisely when. Now, the U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry has defended the Obama administration's plans to combat Islamic State militants in the face of pointed and at times contentious questioning from a Senate panel. We understand that moments after Kerry spoke, the House of Representatives voted to authorize the training and equipping of moderate opposition forces in Syria to fight the Sunni radical group also known as ISIL or IS.
Order. Secretary Kerry, back from a whirlwind diplomatic tour, rallying international backing to take on the Islamic State, told lawmakers America's goal and path forward are clear.
ISIL must be defeated. Period. End of story. The United States will not go it alone. That has been a fundamental principle on which President Obama has sought to organize this effort. And that is why we are building a coalition, a global coalition. There are more than 50 countries that already have agreed or are now doing something. Not every country will decide that their role is to have some kind of military engagement.
Senators of both parties on the Foreign Relations Committee expressed doubts about Mr. Obama's decision not to ask Congress for broad authorization to fight the Islamic State. Committee Chairman Robert Menendez.
Temporary and targeted airstrikes in Iraq and Syria fall under the President's powers as Commander-in-Chief. But if the military campaign lasts for an extended period of time, which I gather it will, it is my belief that Congress will need to approve an ISIL-specific authorization for the use of military force.
Other lawmakers were critical of the administration's strategy in Syria, which depends on boosting the fighting capacity of moderate opponents of President Bashar al-Assad and convincing them to focus on combating Sunni radicals. Republican Bob Corker doubts the plan will work.
You're asking us to approve something that we know, the way you've laid it out, makes no sense. This doesn't even seem serious.
In response, Kerry said Syrian moderates will benefit from a robust international air campaign targeting the Islamic State and predicted that the battlefield successes will swell the ranks of moderate fighters. He also addressed the question of a broader congressional authorization.
I'm asking, do it. Pass it. We'd love to have you do it. But we're not going to get stuck in the situation when we have the authority of not exercising our authority to do what we believe we need to do to protect the country.
Moments later, the House approved a limited authorization to train and equip moderate Syrian rebels, a measure the Senate is expected to vote on later Thursday. Those will likely be Congress's only actions regarding the Islamic State until midterm elections in November.
After the break on The World Today, President Barack Obama is committed to not having a boots-on-ground situation in Iraq. Please stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching The World Today on Channels Television. Now, the U.S. President Barack Obama is repeating his pledge to not embroil the U.S. military in another ground war in Iraq. His remarks to American forces in Florida come a day after the country's top military commander told Congress he would recommend sending U.S. combat troops to Iraq if it were to become a necessity.
Shortly after the turn of the century, America found itself in not one, but two wars. And now, nearly 14 years later, a promise to conflict-weary U.S. forces from their commander-in-chief.
I will not commit you and the rest of our armed forces to fighting another ground war in Iraq. After a decade of massive ground deployments, it is more effective to use our unique capabilities in support of partners on the ground so they can secure their own country's futures.
President Obama spoke at MacDill Air Force Base Wednesday after a briefing at U.S. Central Command on his counterterrorism strategy to degrade and ultimately destroy the Islamic State militant group. That strategy, which the president unveiled a week ago in a nationwide address, focuses on building a broad coalition and expanding the air campaign against the Islamic State in Iraq and Syria. The president's reaffirmation to not embark on a second combat mission in Iraq came after the chairman of the U.S. Joint Chief of Staff, General Martin Dempsey, made headlines during testimony Tuesday to U.S. lawmakers.
If there are threats to the United States, then I, of course, would go back to the president and make a recommendation that may include the use of U.S. military ground forces.
President Obama repeated Wednesday the United States would not send forces into direct combat and also would not go it alone. He added that the United States will lead differently, but still lead as the world is confronted with different challenges, from the Islamic State to the Ebola outbreak.
If there is a need for a rescue mission, when the world is threatened, when the world needs help, it calls on America. Even the countries that complain about America, when they need help, who do they call? They call us.